So I'm going to start off by reading a poem and then go into the talk proper. So the poem is Kindness by Naomi Shihab Nye. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolved in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel to where the Indian in the white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you. He too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you have been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. So in this poem, Naomi Shihab Nye describes how a strong experience whilst travelling in South America showed her how important kindness is. She came to understand that it's only kindness that made sense to her anymore. She experienced impermanence in quite a stark and shocking way, and was able to reflect that the dead Indian could have been her, that there was no difference between self and other. It also showed her the importance of empathy and allowing kindness to emerge quite naturally as a response to sorrow and loss. She describes kindness as the motivating factor behind simple daily routines and concludes with the declaration that kindness is what she had been searching for all this time. And now she's found it, realised its potency, how essential it is, it will go with her everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. So in this talk, I hope to draw out a few elements of this poem to illustrate how essential kindness is in family life. So first of all, the dictionary definition of the word kindness is the quality of being friendly, generous and considerate. And I'm consciously choosing to use the word kindness instead of metta, which we're also used to hearing. I think at the moment I have a personal preference for using a word that I'm a lot more connected to culturally. Because it's my language, part of my culture, I feel I resonate with it a lot deeper than a word from another culture that I'm not so deeply connected to, my skin, my bones and my blood. And that's not to say I don't like the word metta, I think it's great. It's just what's alive for me at the moment. But if the word metta for you is really powerful, then just keep exchanging that every time I say the word kindness. And then it will work for you too. So, I was looking at the origins of the word kindness, and it's quite interesting how the word came about. I like the history of language. And it's the bringing together of two words from slightly different areas. So you've got the old English word kind, which is C-Y-N-D-E, and that's come from Germanic roots. And then that fused with the English word kin, meaning family. So it's quite interesting that you get this this idea of kind as in, the way they use it in mankind and womankind, sort of similarity, coming in with family, coming in with having natural feelings of tenderness towards somebody. They're all coming in to form this one word, which is kindness. And then in German, obviously, the word for children is Kinder, which again, that's all coming in from the same sort of roots. And I just really like that, actually. I just really like that that language has sort of brought those qualities all together in one word. So, well, what does kindness look like in family life? What is it? It can take on many different guises. It's so many different things. It can be something really, really big, a grand statement, the leaving of thousands of pounds in a will from an elderly aunt who never met you. Or, it can just be a little smile that you give to your child to encourage them along the path. Kindness is empathy, really listening to their partner when they've come home from work, really listening to their child who was a bit upset at school today, really taking them on, taking them in. Kindness is patience, being patient with our little toddler as they're spending ages to walk a very, very short distance and stopping and picking everything up on the path and just being patient with what they're experiencing, being very different to your experience of trying to get somewhere. Kindness is care. The kind of care we might give to an elderly, frail relative, to feed them or wash their face, which is the same care that we would give a small child to change their nappy, bathe them, feed them, and so on. Kindness is deciding to have an early night, giving yourself a bit of a rest, prioritising your own need for rest as well. And kindness is not about being passive. It's not about just being a doormat and saying, yeah, everything's fine, and just feeling like you have to keep saying yes to everyone and everything. Because kindness, as I'll talk a bit later, it's about the two sides of the coin of giving and receiving, making sure that everybody is getting their needs met, including you. That's the only way it can really work. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And kindness is expressed by our ethical choices. When we do the weekly shopping trip, everything that we're putting in our trolley, there's decisions there, isn't there? We're choosing to spend our money on things that are going to harm people and the environment and animals the least. Those are acts of kindness. Don't underestimate how kind you're being by, for example, choosing not to eat meat, if that's what you do. Or choosing the fair trade option, choosing the more environmentally friendly option. Those are all acts of kindness. Kindness is stopping for a cup of tea. Kindness is booking a retreat. Kindness is seeing what the best course of action is. And in that sense, it's actually wisdom and compassion in action. When Peter and I separated a few years ago, it was quite a challenging time. It brought a lot of challenges up for both of us as we were trying to change how we were living and our relationship to each other, trying to manage how we were going to progress forwards with it all. And I was very clear in my mind at the time that the best way to act with all of those communications and decisions was to try and act from a place of kindness. It just felt like that was the way through it. Time when we were both feeling a lot of hurt and pain, that seemed like the best thing to do. It was like that was my rock. I was just going to keep coming back and let's just try and do this as kindly as possible. I was convinced that was the only way through it. And I think now, looking back over the last few years and where we are now as a family, that I can see that that's really be very beneficial to all of us and continues to be, in the sense of sort of setting up those habits of how we would relate to each other. We've just carried on like that, and that's meant that we've been able to continue to shape our family life and keep our family together in a very different way. Now in 2 houses instead of just one, no longer in a romantic relationship with each other, and so on and so forth. But I had it pointed out to me the other day that actually the implications of trying to act as kindly as possible weren't just having an effect on those very close to me. That actually when we act, everything ripples out. So actually it also meant that it kept all of our families in a sort of stable and harmonious situation, rather than kind of ripping apart, as sometimes these things can, those sort of family structures. And also, the implications as well on, say, the Sangha, because Peter and I are both part of the Sangha as well. It was very important to me that there weren't going to be negative implications there as well. So my favourite line of the poem is, "Only kindness makes sense anymore." I think that's very strong. It's quite a statement, isn't it? Now, why is that? Why is that? Well, if you flip it round and look at the opposite, well, what would be the opposite of that? The opposite of kindness is actually, well, cruelty, apathy, selfishness, isolation, and that's actually the opposite of kinship. The opposite of family is a sense of isolation. And it's okay sort of thinking about family as being a sort of lovely, kind, caring situation. But I think the fact is, for a lot of us, that might not have actually been our experience. Yeah? It might be what we're currently aspiring to in our current situation, whether that looks like a conventional family or whether it's more a family of friends and so on. But, a lot of us will have had experiences in our childhood that weren't what we would have wanted for ourselves. And it might be that our parents thought that they were doing their best by us. And it might be that they weren't. I think we have to be quite realistic about, what went on in our childhoods and really acknowledge if there was something quite painful and difficult that will have had an effect as well. And just to be kind to ourselves around it. A lot of people spend their whole lives trying to recover from their childhoods. So we know what it's like, don't we? I think that I'm fully aware myself. I know what it was like to not have certain aspects in my childhood that I would have wanted. So I can reflect on that and think, well, I'd like to bring those to my children's childhood as much as possible, as much as I can. So only kindness makes sense anymore. I had a time, I think it must have been last year, where I just felt like I was just up against everything for one reason or another. And everything just felt really difficult, like on top of me, when it's just too much. I remember sitting down to meditate, and it was I had a very strong meditation. Partly sort of holding this sense of kind of like, oh, life, yeah, this is all a bit much actually. And just sort of dropping down into a sort of a deeper, calmer space, and just having this realisation that the only way I could possibly respond to any of that stuff that was going on in my life was with kindness. That was the only way I could do it. There wasn't any other way that was going to work. That was the only way. So, and that just really stuck with me. I felt like I'd had a realisation that was really, really useful. I just keep trying to come back to it again and again and again. Because we never really sort of crack it this side of enlightenment, do we? We just have to keep on kind of relearning again and again what's useful, what's going to really work. And that's sort of what I did. It kind of helped me remember. I got it tattooed on my arm as well, just in case. Only kindness. There's little acts that we do in family life that bring us together and keep us together. That sense of kinship and family. When we're talking family, family is what it is to you. It's not just the nuclear setup that we've kind of been raised to believe is family. We actually make our own families. We have our own families around us, whatever that might look like. Whether we actually have birth children of our own or not, we still set up family situations for ourselves. There's just little things that we do every day. Gently waking our children up for school if they're sleeping in like mine do, or getting their breakfast, getting them up and out into the day, carefully choosing exactly the right snack for them at school pick-up time because I know that's their favourite thing, and those little things, bearing in mind, just always thinking about the other person. It's that bit in the poem that says, it's kindness that sends us out to mail letters and buy bread. Because family life's got a lot of routine in it, hasn't it? It can be quite dull, actually, and repetitious at times, like, here we go again, school run, bedtime, bath, books, and sometimes it can feel a bit, not all the time, but sometimes. So I quite like that idea of, well, actually, it's actually kindness behind those things. bearing that in mind. I always remember Punyamala telling me about how she kind of had a breakthrough about her weekly task of the ironing, which she hated doing all the ironing for her sons and her husband. And she realised that if she took time to really connect with each garment of clothing and really think about the person who it belonged to, or what it was that they would do in it, what they would be wearing it for, whether it was some uniform or their favourite top, or, it just sort of really connected her in a lot more, and it just made the whole experience a lot lighter, a lot more sort of joyful, because it was something that she needed to do every week, but she found a way to be kind to herself with it, and just sort of stay connected in with her family as well. It's quite interesting looking at the science of kindness. When I was researching for this poem, I read this book called Why Kindness is Good for You by David R. Hamilton. I think the R is probably important. It's probably another David Hamilton, isn't it? He's written a book somewhere. It's actually David R. Hamilton, PhD. So scientific research tells us that when we're doing something kind, it causes oxytocin to be released, both in our brain and in the brain of the recipient. So that's actually the sort of warm, fuzzy feeling you get. You actually are getting a warm, fuzzy feeling in your body. It's the release of oxytocin. And that release of oxytocin, in a way, well, it's a pleasant experience. And we know that with pleasant experiences, we want them again and again, don't we? So actually, we're sort of supported in our mind, in our biology, in what's actually happening in our brains, to repeat acts of kindness. It was interesting reading about that, because I had this extraordinary experience a few weeks ago, where I was encouraged by some friends to crowdfund for some money to fund some private medical care. I've been struggling to try and access medical care on the NHS as quickly as I'd like it, because the NHS is just not able to meet demand at the moment, and it would mean waiting a few years before I could see anybody. And so my friends suggested that I do this. So I thought, oh, okay, I will. And in the space of 4 days, I raised £700, which was just extraordinary. I mean, the whole experience was extraordinary. It was an incredible teaching point. What was interesting was the physical experience of doing it. Was actually I spent those 4 days just feeling like I was completely on a high, like I was buzzing, really alive. Like the whole of me was alive. I was goosebumpy. I was really, and actually finding out now after reading this book, I was like, I must have just been completely flooded with oxytocin. As more and more people were giving, and it's an extraordinary thing. And every time I write to somebody to say, oh, thank you so much, it really means a lot. And then people would write back and thank me for giving them the opportunity to give something to me. And that again was a teaching. It's like, oh, this isn't just about, I really like this. Can you give it to me? Oh yeah, okay, maybe. People were actually really, really happy to be given the opportunity to help. I just think that's absolutely beautiful. So that really is the sort of two sides of the same coin. Giving and receiving are really one and the same thing. It's the whole thing has to happen. It's not just about taking stuff, and it's not just about giving stuff. It's a completely sort of symbiotic relationship. So oxytocin actually helps us consider others more, and it can make us more trusting and more generous, and it can help us see others in a better light. So if we're having more oxytocin released in our brains, we actually see people with more kindly eyes. That's actually how it works. And there are other health benefits as well. So actually being open-hearted actually supports our heart health. It actually means our actual heart is likely to be a lot more healthier. And there are other benefits as well to our immune system, endocrine system, and so on. That actually living a kind life, we are scientifically proven to live a longer life. Extraordinary. So we're supported on a biological level to be kind. But we don't do a kind thing because we should, and we don't do it because we're good Buddhists or good parents. We actually do it because it makes sense. Because it's actually what being human is all about. Because we're so deeply and intrinsically interconnected with each other, like how could anything but make sense? How could anything else make sense? The Buddha teaches us that there is no distinction between self and other, and that kindness is that in action. So why would I not want the very best for everyone else and myself? There's a lovely quote from Bhante, which I agree with wholeheartedly. He says, I believe that humanity is basically one. I believe that it's possible for any human being to communicate with any other human being, to feel for any other human being, to be friends with any other human being. This is what I truly and deeply believe. This belief is part of my own experience. It's part of my own life. It's part of me. I cannot live without this belief, and I would rather die than give it up. For me, to live means to practice this belief. You might also be aware that when the Dalai Lama was asked to talk about what his religion was, he just simply said, my religion is kindness. And when the Buddha died and Ananda was grieving him, he described the Buddha as he who was so kind. And kindness was one of his principal area of what his character was. It wasn't just a little bit of something he did. The Buddha was so kind, it ran through him. We hear a lot about the Buddha acting with skillful means, where he works out the best way to respond to people, and that's an act of kindness. So when we speak kindly to our child or act kindly to our partner, we're actually living out the truth of interconnectedness in that moment. And exemplifying universal truths is the greatest gift we can give to our children. Our children watch us and learn from us. And you might be familiar with Bhante's exhortation to parents in 12 Points for Buddhist Parents that he wrote, where he says it's important that we influence our children before somebody else does. So there's a lot of external influences out there in the world, and some of them we might not choose our children to be exposed to. So while we have the chance, while they're still sort of fairly young and living with us, if we try and really exemplify the qualities that we're passionate about, and really try and live that out, and expose them to things that we think will be really useful for their lives. So for me personally, that's the Dharma. I'm very passionate about my children being exposed to the Dharma. That means influencing them before somebody else does. And that, in a sense, it's an act of kindness to them as far as I'm concerned. And also, if they witness us as adults being kind to ourselves, they will learn that. They will learn how to be kind to themselves. And that's incredibly important for when they face their teenage years, and when they face the leaving home and all of that. To be able to know how to be kind to yourself will be a very, very valuable thing. And also don't forget, the thing is, we already know how to be doing this. We already know how to be supporting this sort of a practice. We have these two fantastic meditation practices, the mindfulness of breathing and the metta-bhavana. And they really, really support the practice of kindness. So we already have those. And that doesn't matter whether we're doing them on the cushion or off the cushion or both. And we could even just be doing them in a sort of less structured way, a bit like how I teach meditation with children. But really putting that effort into cultivating mindfulness and metta naturally supports the practice of kindness. And every little thing has a positive effect. That lovely quote from the Dhammapada where it just says, drop by drop, the water fills the water pot. So every little act of kindness is all having an effect. The great thing about karma, isn't it? We learn that everything has an effect. So we don't need to think, well, I'm not doing it enough for it to have an effect. You're doing it, you're trying, and it's all having an effect. I think the other thing is, being around other people who've got similar commitment to sort of consciously practicing kindness can really support what we're doing as well. And I think we will definitely find that in the Sangha. And we may as well find that in other groups of people that we spend time with as well. But that can really support what we're trying to do. I also find it really useful to spend a bit of time working through a book by Kristin Neff called Self-Compassion, which I'd really recommend. They're just those little, the more we get to know ourselves, the more we realise that actually sometimes we're a bit lacking with self-compassion, that we can be with that sort of kindness to ourselves. We might have this sort of way of speaking to ourselves, or we're undermining ourselves or sniping, or we're not good enough or whatever. And it's just really useful to try and just get in there and just unpick that a little bit more. And there'll be times when we're just not feeling it, when we're snappy and impatient. That's understandable. We're pretty up against it in family life. But we can be kind to ourselves about that. Pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, give ourselves a hug, and have another go. And why? Because only kindness makes sense. Thank you.